Greetings everyone and welcome. My name is Alfred and in this video I'm going to show you how to create a custom sidebar in Flutter. If you watched the previous video, we created a dark theme mode for our Flutter application, and this is where we reached in that video. We reached a point where we could toggle between the dark theme mode and the light mode theme. So we're going to continue from here, and what we'll be creating is the sidebar. This is the sidebar that we're going to create in this video. All right, so let's go ahead and see how we can do that. I have already opened the previous application on my VS Code, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to run the project. All right, so it's going to take some time to run or to build. And while it's building, what we are going to do inside our views, pages, shared, and then in widgets, we're going to create a new file here. And this file, I'm just going to call it navbar. Sorry, it's not navbar this time around, but sidebar. Remember, we already created the navbar dot. So like that. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create a stateful widget. So STF, it's going to generate a stateful widget for me. And what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to call it sidebar like that. And now we already generated our stateful widget and we called it sidebar, and this is what we'll be using to create our sidebar. All right, okay, so what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna create some variables inside this class. I'll be having some local variables, and the first one I'm gonna start with, it will be the animation. So what I'm gonna do, it's gonna say let animation. No, it's going to be animation, and it's going to be having a late initialization. So I'm just going to have the animation, and it's going to be of type double. And the name I'm going to give it to be sidebar animation. So just going to call it sidebar animation like that. Another thing I also want is the controller for this animation. So I'm just going to call it, it's going to be of type animation controller. And I'm just going to call it sidebar animation controller like that. And one thing also I'm going to I'll define here, it's overlay entry, and this is going to be nullable. So I'm just going to call it sidebar overlay entry. Another thing I'm going to have is the layer link. So I'm going to have final and sidebar overlay layer link, and it's gonna be layer link like that. All right, so I still have another one. It's gonna be boolean, and I'm just going to say is sidebar. Just going to have a value of true for now. All right, so what I can do, I'm going ahead, and from here I'm going to the init state. So want to init state, and what I'm going to do here, I'm going to just go ahead and remove this to do. And here what I'm going to do, I'm going to say the sidebar. Now I'm going to initialize the controller that we defined. Remember that we said it will have a late initialization, and this is what now we are doing right now. So it's going to be animation, and it's going to be animation controller, and it's going to be like, what I want to add here is the duration, and duration, it's going to come from duration, and it's going to be in milliseconds. I'm just going to have half a second. So I'm going to get to have 5,000, and the basic, it's going to be this. It's going to have an error because we need to bring in the go here. So I'm just going to say with single ticket provider mixing, right? And now the error goes away, and it's gonna say something, and we can just go ahead and have it as a constant, and it will stop complaining. I'm just going ahead and collapsing the sidebar for my Visual Studio Code so that I can have some space. And then after this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to set state just inside the init state. So I'm going to have set state. And what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to have widget binding. Widget binding, and I'll get into the instance, and then I'm going to add post callback, and I'm just going to leave it like that. And what I'm going to do here, I will return show side. Remember, we don't have this method, but we're just going to create it right now. So to be show sidebar overlay. All right. Okay. So now we have that. So what we're gonna do before we create this show sidebar overlay, I'm gonna get out of the init state, and here what I'm going to do, I'm going to have my dispose, and I have to dispose some resources that we are using. So it's gonna be sidebar animation controller, and this is what I'm gonna just dispose like that. So I'm gonna save that. And now we can write this, we can implement this. So let's go ahead here. It's not going to return anything, so it's going to be void method, this one. And I'll just go ahead and get inside the method itself. And here, I'm just going to define some other variables. And the first one, it's going to be an overlay dot of, be context like that. So of course I have to give it a name, and I'm going to have it a sidebar overlay. So it's going to be overlay of context. And right, I think I can work with that for now. If I need some more, I'm going to just come back and define them here. All right. So next, it's gonna now assign the overlay entry that we created. So I'm just going to say the sidebar overlay entry. It's going to be the same as overlay entry. It's going to take a builder in here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to say, going to have just context in here, and then I'm going to return consumer. If you watch the other video, you might notice that we created a provider, and that's what we are using. So I'm just going to use that as well for my sidebar, and we created a UI provider, and that's what I'm going to use as well for my sidebar. And it's going to be consumer, and the consumer, it's going to be of type UI provider. If you remember, we created the UI provider. All right. So just going to pass in the UI provider like that. And let me pass the second one. I don't need anything else. And then after that, just going to have this like that. So here I have to return something so that it doesn't keep on complaining. So, and what I'm going to return here, it's an animated builder. But before I return the animated builder, I want to assign my sidebar animation to something. So sidebar animation. If you remember, we created this, and it's going to come from twin. and it's gonna be a double here. So, and I'm gonna set the beginning and the end. Remember, the beginning is where the animation begins, and at the end it's where the animation ends. All right. So I'm gonna have a beginning, and I'm gonna begin from the zero, or from zero, and I'm gonna end at 75% of the width of the device that I am using. So if I need to get 75% of my device, then it means I'm gonna use the media query of context, and I'm gonna pass in the size of the device, and then I'm gonna get the width, and after that I have to multiply that by 0.75 so that I get the 75% of my width. And then what I can do here, I can animate the sidebar controller, the sidebar animation controller. So I'm going to say it's be sidebar animation controller that I'm going to animate. All right. Okay, so it's time now to return my builder, my animated builder here, and I'm just gonna say return gonna be animated builder. All right. And the animated builder, it's going to take in the animation and build it well. And now the animation, it's the animation controller that we just defined. So it's going to be sidebar animation controller. And for the builder, what I'm going to do, it's going to be build a context. Build context. It's going to be build context. And then I'm just going to call it context. And then I'm going to have a widget which is nullable, and it's going to be the child, of course, child, like that. And then what I'm going to do here is just like that. And now I need to return something else. All right, so you can just go ahead and tokenize that. So here I'm just going to return position widget. So I'm going to say positioned, this one. And also it's going to have width and a child as well. So let me define the width first. And the width of this, it's going to be the value of our animation. So it's going to be sidebar animation dot value. Right. So while our animation is happening, it's going to increase the width, and the width is what we're going to be putting into our position as the width of the positioned widget. All right, so you have two commas. I'm going to remove one, and I'm going to have to return to have a child here, and the child I'm going to have is a composite transform flow, like that. This is the child that I'm going to have here, and it's going to have a link, and the link, it's the overlay link that we created, this one, right? So, and another thing it's going to have is the child, of course, and the child, now I'm just going to have to return a container. If I were to tokenize that and save, and another thing I'm going to have for this container is the before I return container, I think I have to, before I get into container, instead of having container as my child of the composite transform follower, I'm going to have another widget, and it's going to be material. All right. And then material is going to have a child, and that child is going to be now the container. Right. And what I can do, I'm going to have color for this material. So I'm just going to have a color, and it's going to be, for now, colors to red, so that we can see what we are doing. And here I'm going to have another child. It's going to be text, and this text, of course, it's going to be, I'm just going to call it anything. You can call it anything, but I'm just going to call it here. So I'm going to pass it as a constant, same as this one, constant. And it's complaining containers and constant don't agree, so just going to have it like that. It's complaining because we don't have anything other than the child. So it's saying as if we wanted, then we could just use the sized box, and then maybe we could have the whole thing as a constant, like that. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to have to stay with container for now. So I'm going to save that, and After that, what we have to do one thing. Here, after the overlay entry, what we're going to do is we're going to say sidebar overlay. It's going to be the sidebar overlay and sidebar overlay that we defined. So I'm not sure if we call it sidebar overlay. Sidebar, I think should be just going to have it in small letters. I'll have it like that. So sidebar overlay. I'm going to have to insert, and the entry is going to be now the sidebar overlay entry that we defined. And this could be, I'm just going to check. And another thing I'm going to do here, I'm just going to reset my animation. So sidebar animation controller dot reset. You could reset or you could just leave it like that. All right. So I'm gonna save that. If I want to reload the application, we're not gonna see any changes. Even we click here, there's no change because we've not brought the sidebar to the home screen here. So let's go ahead and do that. In our home screen, remember we already imported, or we already brought in the navbar and the users list. And now here in between, I'm just going to bring in the sidebar. So I'm just going to say sidebar like that. It's going to complain, and I'm just going to say const. And this token should be a comma, of course. Not a comma, but yeah, it should be a comma. So I'm going to save that. Go ahead and restart the application once more. And now if I were to come here, you can see now I already have the sidebar here. You can see there's a name coming from here. It's the name that we inserted into our sidebar. If I go back to the sidebar here, and instead of saying I start from the 0 or I start from 0, I'm going to say I start from 150, like that. So now we can see clearly the sidebar. Remember, the animation is not still working correctly because we need to trigger it. And now, as you can see, now we have we have a little bit space here. We can see the text that we wrote. All right, but still we need to do some work. There's still some work to be done on the sidebar. And so we could start from the position. So remember, in this position, we have our width matching the sidebar animation value for now. And I'm also going to define my height, and the height, I'm just going to make it take the whole height of the device. So I'm just going to copy my media query here, going to put it inside here, and the size of the height, it's going to take now the height. And that's what we're going to have for height. I'm just going to reload the application, restart the application, and I'm going to bring in the application. And now, as you can see, I have my sidebar spanning the whole height of the application. All right. So let's go ahead and define some of the things inside the sidebar. So what we are going to do for now, I am going to have a child inside my container, and I'm not just going to have the text child. Instead of having the text child, if you remember we had a text child, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to have my text editor on one side and my emulator on the other side, so that we can see them both, right? Like that. So what I'm going to do, instead of having the child is my containers child here, I mean text is my containers child here, I'm going to have the child is a safe area, like that. And this save area, it's going to take in another child, and it's going to be a stack. All right. And now this stack is going to take some children, and the first child of this stack, it's going to be a column. And now column, it's also going to take in some children, and the first child of this column is going to be a container, right? So I'm going to save that. Go ahead, and in the container, the first child of this column here, it's going to have another child, and now this child, it's just going to be a text, right? And this text is just gonna say, you can call it whatever you want. Mine, I'm just going to call it lighter.academy. So it's gonna be lighter academy like that. It's complaining that we should make it a constant, but I'm just not gonna do that. So I want to have prevent the overflow, and the way I'm gonna do that, then say it's going to come from text overflow. I'm gonna have the three dots or ellipses if you would like, and I still gonna have some other things. For example, I'm gonna have the style. It's gonna come from the text style, and the first thing I want to have is the letter spacing. I'm gonna have 2.0. Then I'm gonna have the font size, and I'm going to pass in 24.0. And I'm gonna have something else, and this is gonna be the font weight, and it's gonna come from the font weight, and it's gonna be bold. And now I'm gonna have color here, and color is gonna come from our color theme. So just going to say theme dot off. It's gonna be dot off color scheme dot, and I'm gonna use the primary color that I have for my theme. All right. So I'm gonna have some margins for my container, and it's gonna be age inset, and I'm just going to have it from the top. So only, and I'm going to pass top, and I'm going to have that 0.0. Could have it as a constant though, like that. So if I save that and I go ahead and restart the application, as you can see now, we are in safe area. We have some space from the top, right? Although we still have a very small, we still have a very small width. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna have 350 for now, just for testing purposes. So 350. Yeah, 350 to look like that. And now it's time to change the background color of our sidebar. And I'm still going to assign this before I move out of this container. And I'm not going to say, I'm going to set here, I'm going to say alignment. It's going to come from the alignment, and gonna go with the top center. Right, gonna save that. Yeah, gonna go now to the top center like that. So what I want to change is the color that we have for our material here. So just going to remove this color, and I'm going to pass in color from the theme. So theme dot off, and it's gonna be color scheme, of course. And then I'm going to take the surface color like that. So use the surface color that I defined already in my theme, and that should change the color of the sidebar, right? So changes the color of the sidebar. And now what I want to do, this container here, I'm going to change it just a little bit, and I'm going to have decoration for it. So decoration, it's going to be coming from box decoration. And here I'm going to pass some properties. So I'm going to pass color is the first thing. And I don't think I need to pass color since I already have color on the parent here. So what I'm going to pass is the box shadow. So box shadow, and the box shadow, it's going to be coming from box shadow. And into the box shadow, I'm going to pass the color of the shadow, and it's going to be coming from the theme. So context, and here I'm going to go grab the color scheme, and I have my color scheme, and here I have the color that I want to use, shadow, but I'm just going to have to use very little of the opacity. So I'm going to say opacity will be 0.1. Right? So that is for the color property. And then I'm going to have spread radius, I'm going to pass in 2.0. And then I'm going to have the blur radius, and I'm going to pass in 3.0, 3.0, and then I'm going to have the offset. So offset going to be of type offset, and it's going to get the values 0 and 1. Like that, it's going to be constant. So I'm going to save that again and restart the application. And as you can see now, we have a shadow on the card. But as you can see, we changed something, and that's because we did not define the color of the container. So I'm just going to do that for right now. I'm just going to come here and insert the container and decoration here just before the box shadow. I'm going to define the color of the container to the surface color that we already defined. So if I save that and restart the application once more, we should have a better color looking now. And as you can see now, we have a color here. All right. So you can see now we have the shadow on the right side of the sidebar. So the second child of our stack here, it's going to be a positioned widget. So after the container, we're going to have a positioned widget here. And this position widget, it's going to take a child of a row. And the row, it's going to have some children. And the first child of this row, it's going to be a container. All right. So let me first of all just rearrange this. We need a comma there. So just going to have it like that. We have a position here. So I'm going to position this, and I'll start from the bottom. I'm going to say bottom will be 2.0, and the right side is going to be 0, so that we align it on the right side. And the row here, I'm going to say main axis alignment. It's going to be main axis alignment, and I want to align it at the end. So I want to align the contents of this row to the right. Okay, so I'm going to align the content of the container inside the row, and the alignment, it's going to be in the middle. So I'm going to say center like that. So after that, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to give some margins to this container. And it's going to be constant. It's coming from the edge inset. And I'm just going to give all 5.0. And also going to give some padding. And it's going to be same value as my margins. So after that, I'm going to have a child of the container. And the child, it's going to be just an inkwell widget. And this is also going to have some events. So on hover, I'm going to start with this, and on hover, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to let it be like that. I'm just also going to have another one on top, and on top, what I'm going to do for now, I'm just going to have it be like that. After we set the values for toggle, we're going to provide the setter here that changes the visibility of the sidebar. And this inkwell, it's going to have a child, and this child, it's going to be an icon. And I'm just going to pass in the icons. This should be icons, and I'm just going to have an arrow bar, and this one like that. I'm also going to define the size of my icon, and I'm going to pass in that 0.0. And another thing I'm going to pass in is the color, which is going to come from the theme that we configured, and it's going to be the color scheme dot on error container like that. So it's reddish, right? So I'm going to save that. Go ahead and going to reload the application, and now as you can see, we have a button on the right side of our sidebar. At the bottom here, we have a button that we can click and do send an event from there. All right. So that is it for now. What we are going to do, we are going to go into our provider, and inside provider, we can define some variables and some getters and setters that we can use to manipulate the sidebar. Right, so let's go ahead and open our UI provider. And one variable that we got defined here is the sidebar active, or you can just say is sidebar. And I'm going to initialize this to, I'm going to assign this to false. All right, and this is gonna be a boolean like that. It's gonna be a boolean like that. So after that, what I want to do, I want to set my sidebar. So set sidebar, and it's also going to receive a boolean here, and it's going to be status, maybe status, and then it's going to take that status and assign it to the is sidebar active variable here, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to say is sidebar active. It's going to be the status that we are getting in. All right, and now what we have this data already, what I want to have also is the getter here. So I'm going to define a getter here. So I'll say get, and I'm going to just return say get sidebar, and this is just going to return the is sidebar active like that. So now we are done with the with our provider, and now we can go back to the sidebar and configure it so that if the sidebar is active, then we are going to have to return the sidebar, and if it's not, then we are going to hide the sidebar. All right, so I'm going to my sidebar, so it should be the sidebar here, and I'm going inside the composited transform folder here, and this is where I'm going to check whether we have the sidebar shown or not. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to here, and I will say if sidebar, I think I should use the UI provider. If UI provider, remember the UI provider that we defined, let's get sidebar. If it returns true, then what we're going to return is this. Otherwise, what we are going to return, I'm going to return the sized box dot shrink. I'm going to return the sized box dot shrink like that. All right, and now we have one thing we have to do. Inside our consumer here, what we're going to do, we're going to check the sidebar if it's active or not. So I'm going to say if, and we're going to have UI.provider.get sidebar. If this is true, then that we're going to put forward our animation controller. So it's going to be sidebar animation controller forward. Otherwise, we are going to reset the animation controller. So if not that, then what we are going to do here, we're going to just go ahead and reset like that. All right. Fine. So if you remember, we defined a button here where we have to reset, or we have to hide our sidebar, and we're going to do that here. So here we're going to say UI provider dot, and we're going now to set sidebar, and I'm going to say false like that, and that's going to hide our sidebar, right? So let's try that. Going to restart the application, hidden, so there's no way for me to hide it already. So if I go back just here and pass this one to true instead of false, going to have that as true. I'm going to restart the application again, and now it's shown. If I click on the button here, it should hide the, so it's not hiding. It should hide the, and it's not hiding because after we set the sidebar status, after we change, we are not notifying the listeners that we've changed the state of the sidebar. So here what we can do, we can just notify the listeners that are listening to this value here, or that variable change. And I'm going to restart the application again. it restarts, and now I'm going to try it one more time, and now as you can see, it hides the sidebar. All right. Okay, so after that, we want to activate this button here on the navigation bar, so that if we click on it, it brings in the sidebar. All right. So what I'm gonna do, I'm going to my sidebar here, and where we find the consumer, I'm going to just take this part here. I'm going just to take the consumer itself, go ahead into my nav bar, and inside the nav bar, the consumer is already there. So what I can do, we already have the consumer there when we were creating the theme. So we were toggling theme off on. And since we already have the consumer there, we don't need it to bring it again. So I'm just going to use that and go to where the menu is. And here, if we click on the menu, if we tap on the menu, I'm just going to go inside the provider itself, that's the UI provider, and I'm going to set this sidebar to true this time around. All right. So if I save that and restart the application, it's going to start with the sidebar already shown. I'm going to hide it. If I click on the menu, it's going to show me the sidebar. All right. Like that. I bring in the sidebar again from the menu. I close it and bring it again. All right. So that's the kind of sidebar that we were tasked with. And what I can do, I'm just going to bring in the menu so that I can see how it looks like with the menu already brought into the sidebar. So I already have the menu with me on my clipboard. And what I can do, I'm just going to go inside to the sidebar here. And I have this column, all of it in my clipboard. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to paste it in. Right. So I'm going to paste it in. And now I'm going to restart the application. And now, as you can see, I brought in the menu now. And as you can see now, we have a complete sidebar. If you like, you can just get into the menu itself and just check out the list. This is actually just a list that I created. As you can see, it's just a repetition of the same thing. All right. So this is the kind of sidebar that we wanted to create in this video. As you can see, we can toggle the theme now, and we can still get our sidebar. All right. Okay, so one thing that we would want to do is to always have the sidebar hidden so that we can bring it on when we get to the application. And the way we can do that is to turn this back to false, right? So I'm going to have it turned to false so that it doesn't show the sidebar when the application boots up. So I'm going to restart the application. So the application restarts, and now you can see we don't have the sidebar. And if we click on this, it brings in the sidebar, and we can bring it back, bring in the sidebar, and we can hide it. It's going past this point here. It's going past 75% because we, as you can remember, we defined width of 350. And I think it's better to change that to something smaller. So let's go back to our sidebar here, and where we defined the width to be 350, I think we can now have 150. We save that, restart the application, and now when it starts, we're going to see how it's going to behave. Now you can see it's not going until over to the other side, right? So thank you very much for being with me on this one. I'll see you in the next one.